Hello all, welcome back to yet another video from Let's DevOps. In today's video, we are going to look into how to manage credentials, pipeline variables or secrets effectively and efficiently in Bitbucket. This is pretty much the same process how you handle secrets across different CI/CD pipelines, but just for the ease of use, I've picked Bitbucket, but I know that this method pretty much applies to, let's say, GitLab or Azure DevOps or any other CI/CD tool that's available in the market. Now, before jumping into the video, I would like to thank my community for the support you have showed so far. It's just been close to 2 months that I started my YouTube channel, but then the amount of response and people interacting with me has been tremendous. I'm overwhelmed with the amount of response I have received. In fact, I've gone ahead and added in all of my videos a buy me a coffee link. So if you would like to support me, tip me for the content that I'm creating, and if you really like my videos and get some value out of it, I would be really, really happy if you could support, encourage me with some kind of a tip. I would be really happy if you could contribute for the amount of work that's been put in to create content, DevOps content to you. That's something that I would be really, really happy if I get some contributions from my community. All right, without wasting much time, let's get started. Uh, let me explain. All of the work has been done already for making the video crisp, but I will explain in detail exactly what's being done so that you get a fair idea of what all pieces I have set up so far. So this is my Bitbucket repository, and there are two different ways of handling credentials or secrets is something that we are going to see. The first one is to handle or manage the credentials secrets in pipeline variables. Each of these CI/CD tools have something called as pipeline variables where you can configure them and then invoke them in your pipelines. That's the first method. And the second method is using something like a vault, HashiCorp key vault, or in the cloud, if you're in a cloud environment, something like an Azure key vault, or you use something like an Ansible key vault. Now, that's the second method that we are going to see of how you can effectively manage your credentials or secrets using Ansible vault file. Right, let's see the first method of how you can manage it using the pipeline variables. So this is a repository, and in Bitbucket, if you scroll down to the left, you'll see something called as a repository settings. If you click on that, it takes you to this page where at the fag end, you can see something called as repository variables. So if you see, I've upfront created some variables, different kinds of variables in here. It's not rocket science, it's pretty straightforward. You just enter the key and the value of the variables that you want to, or the credentials that you want to store in. If you check this secure checkbox, the value of the key will be masked. Rather, people who have access to this repository, even if they get in, they will not be able to watch the actual password that is sitting behind this key. You can see that there is a locked symbol here, which is called a secure. And if I try to click on it, it just throws an empty text box, but you don't actually see the value. Whereas if I refrain from giving this checkbox, then a password that is stored would be visible to you and any others who have access to this repository. Something like this. You can see that username as a secret. I've made sure that the checkbox is not checked, so I can see the password and the value, username and the password. But for the same set, you can see here, username as a secured secret and password as a secured secret. I've checked the checkbox, which means it's masked and I don't see the actual value. And I have a few other passwords as well for the demo purpose, which I'm going to explain right away. Right. If I go to my repository, I have a Bitbucket Pipelines.yaml file. So let me explain the YAML file with respect to managing the credentials. So if I come here, the first stage that I have is print and unsecured credentials in the pipeline logs. So basically, how do you invoke a variable that is stored as a repository variable? Very simple, straightforward. You just need to append a $sign to the key and the value that key that you have, and then it is going to retrieve the value sitting behind the variable. So that's what I would be doing in the first stage. I'm just going to echo username as a secret. This is an unsecured credential that I've stored, which means I could directly see the value of it on the UI. And similarly, if I invoke it on a pipeline, also I should be able to see the value on the pipeline logs. But please do note that this is one of the bad practices of storing your credentials. Never save or store credentials as a unmasked or unsecured way on your pipeline variables for two reasons. One, anyone who has access to the repository will be able to get the credentials and could play around and mess things up. Second, even if they don't have access, they could probably use it in a step in here, echo the password, and then retrieve the password in the pipeline logs, which it is going to definitely print because it is not secure. That is what we are going to see in the demo as well. So that's step one. Now, let's look at, I'm not going to run the pipeline because I will also explain the other second part of how you can effectively, the industry way of managing a credential, and then we can run the pipeline together at once and then go through the logs and see how things have happened. The second step that I have had is I want to try and print and use a secured credential and see what happens. So I'm just going to do the same thing that I did in step one, but instead of using a variable that is unsecured, here I'm going to use variables that are secured. So username as a secured, I'm going to echo and see if I'm able to print it on the logs. Also, additionally, what I'm going to do, act a little smart. I know it is not going to echo the value right away because it's secured. Maybe I'll play around and let's say try to frame a URL and then pass that into a variable and then try to echo that variable. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to frame a URL, HTTPS, Bitbucket URL, followed by API version, followed by repositories. These two variables are masked, secured on the repository variables. But I'm framing this, echoing the content into another variable, which is bitbucket.url, and then trying to echo that so that whatever values are sitting behind this variable uh, are invoked, and then this entire API call is formed, and then this API call is returned to this variable. And then when I echo the variable, maybe I will be able to retrieve the Bitbucket URL and API version. Kind of a small hacker kind of a sense that I'm trying to do to see if I'm able to get what's sitting behind these variables. That's what I'm going to do in step two. Step three, let's finish this first. Let's run this pipeline for steps one and two and see how things are working. So I go to my Visual Studio Code, just invoke some code change, echo end of step, save, add, commit, push. As you all know, this is a continuous integration pipeline that I've set up, which means that the moment a code change is pushed in, there should be a pipeline that should get kickstarted instantaneously. Boom, there you see. Let's get in here. For now, let's forget about the third step. Let's only watch steps one and two. So first, we want to print an unsecured credits and see if it is visible on the pipeline logs. Echo username as a secret, and I'm echoing the actual variable. Boom, you see that I am able to retrieve the actual secret because it's unsecured, which is what we thought. Second stage is going to be interesting. I want to try and print a secured credential and see if there is any way I can somehow get the password details from. So let's get into this stage. First, I directly echo a secured secret. What does it show? It doesn't show anything. In fact, it does not echo the value of what's sitting behind the variable. It actually echoes the variable in itself. Same with the second one also, because that is also secured. For both these secured variables, it is actually printing the variable itself instead of the value. Okay. Now, my hacker brain works in a different way. I'm trying to frame the API call, and then from the API call, I'm trying to get the credentials that is sitting behind. What will happen? Do I get the details? Nope, you don't get the details. Even if I frame the API call, it will at the backend have the values present in here, but when I echo it, it will never echo the actual value of these variables that is sitting behind the variable. Instead, just echo the variable name in itself. So what we're trying to prove in here is it is designed in such a way that it is smart enough to identify that for no reason a secured variable or a password will be displayed on any of the logs that we use in if we try when we try to invoke it into a pipeline, which is a good thing, and which is how things needs to be. Now, the next one is the second method or the best method of how you can manage the credentials into. I mean, one is you can use it like this as a secure credentials, but if you want an even more secure way or even more control of a lot of credentials, then the next way would be is to use something like an Ansible Vault. Now, what's Ansible Vault? Let's say you have a list of passwords, a set of passwords or credentials. What you could do is you can feed all of these credentials into a file called as, let's say, a secrets.yaml. And once you put them all into a secrets.yaml, you can actually encrypt the whole file itself, and you can store it into some place either in Bitbucket repository or any other locations from where you could retrieve it from. In this demo, I am actually going to store it into Bitbucket itself. Now, firstly, how do I encrypt this entire file? One, what is this vault encryption and stuff? So what I do is I jumped quickly to a command line. And if you see, I have a file called passwordfile.yaml. Let's assume this is my central location of all of the passwords that is required for this project, this repository, this application. What do I do? For now, I'll just play it very simple. I will have the main password stored something like a my own password. I remove the hash. So this is my password for, let's say, main password for some, let's say a DB password or something. And I store it into this password.yaml. And I save it. Never ever make the mistake of directly pushing this file into repository. The only way it can be pushed into a repository is only after it gets encrypted. What is that? That is Ansible Vault encrypt and then the file name. Ansible, as you know, is a configuration management tool, has an inbuilt utility called as Ansible Vault. Now, this utility, you could encrypt and decrypt passwords as a direct string, or you could also encrypt and decrypt the password files itself, the entire file in itself. In this method, we are going to encrypt the entire file in itself. So I just give Ansible Vault encrypt followed by the file name. If it's just a string, I would add something like an Ansible encrypt underscore string, and instead of the file name, I would give the actual password itself that I want to encrypt. Right, we're not doing that. We want to encrypt the file itself. Right. If I give enter, it is going to ask for a vault password. Now, this is the very key factor of how you want to manage these secrets. This vault password is the password that will be used to encrypt and decrypt, be it the file or the string. And this password needs to be owned only by key people who are responsible for the application, like the product owner or the application tech lead or the key developers only. And it must not be shared to anyone and everyone in the team. Let's say I give it a simple password like vault minus pass. It asks for the same. I give it again, and encryption is successful. If I do a cat, you can see that whatever contents inside are sitting inside the YAML file, the secrets YAML file, has been completely encrypted. This content I've copied and then pasted inside my repository in under a folder called secrets. And then I have the same password file.yaml, and then there is this encrypted password file. Now, if I want to use this in my pipeline on the fly, then I must have to decrypt it and then use it in my Bitbucket pipeline step. To decrypt it, again, I need to give this secure password that I have, the Ansible Vault password that I have, into the pipeline step. Couple of ways that we can do. One is if I come back to my Bitbucket pipeline, right now I am echoing Ansible Vault pass and then I run the command Ansible vault decrypt followed by the same command, but then instead of encrypt, it is going to be decrypt followed by the location where the password file is sitting. And then I have a command argument minus minus vault password file, and then I take it from dev.stdin. I mean, it's pretty easy to understand. So the output, standard output, I want to fetch it from the output that is coming before the pipe. So when I echo this variable is again stored as a repository variable. And what's the value that is sitting behind this variable? It is nothing but my Ansible vault password. Again, I cannot directly enter it in here and then do an echo, because anyone who has access will come and then be able to see that password, which means then they can left and right encrypt and decrypt stuff. So no, we shouldn't hard code it here. Instead, I've used the repository variable that we saw on the first example, and using that, I'm echoing the value and followed by Ansible Vault decrypt file name, and then the pass, letting Ansible know that, hey, I know that you want a password to decrypt this file, and that input you can get from the standard input, which is coming from echo. Right. Once this does, you will it will decrypt the entire file, which means that file on the fly will then become uh, machine readable with the actual password sitting in there. And then I'm catting the content of this file, saving the actual secret to this variable, and then I'm echoing this variable to see if I'm getting able to successfully decrypt the file, get the password, and then store the password into a actual variable. Don't again echo any passwords in your pipeline, but this is only for demo purpose to see if all of it has happened clean. I'm not going to run the pipeline again, because since we already ran one, and let's now go to this third step and see what do we have. Uh, Maybe one more additional thing as a bonus, we can see this Bitbucket pipeline that I have runs on a default image Maven. Uh, so you can give a default image, which means that you don't have to specify image at each of the steps that you configure in Bitbucket pipeline. But if any particular step needs to run with a different image, like for example, my first two steps, I don't need any specific images. So they just use the default image and then run steps 1 and 2. But for my step 3, I'm playing something with Ansible, which means I need Ansible installed in the system, or I need an image with Ansible. For that, I am using a specific image, Ansible image, which means that when you do it, specify it this way, it is going to override your default image, and then this specific stage alone is going to get executed in an environment spinned up from this image, just as an additional information. Right. So coming here, I'm just checking the Ansible version 2.17, all good. And you can see that we are doing the decryption at this stage. There is nothing that it can show. So it will decrypt my password file, and the content of the decrypted password file is scattered and then sent to this variable password as Ansible secret. And then finally, we are going to echo it, which means this was actually what I had encrypted and then pushed it into Bitbucket repository. So if I quickly go to my source and then under source, under secrets, you can see that this is how it will sit. Here I showed for just one password, but you can do this for a list of passwords. Additionally, there is also one more third method of how you can safely secure your credentials. That is called as your base64 encoding and decoding. That is also pretty similar to this Ansible Vault stuff, but you don't have to deal with all of the Ansible. It is a Unix utility. So on the command line, the command is pretty straightforward. Let's say I have a password called password itself, and I want to base64 encode it. Then it is pretty straightforward. You just give echo minus n, and then the password that you want to encode, pipe base64. Boom. That's the encoded password of your actual password. If I want to decode it and then retrieve the actual credential that is sitting behind this encoded string, then I give something like go. Oops, make sure that you don't copy any additional spaces. Base 64 minus minus decode. And you get back your actual password, which is password. This is the third way of managing your secrets. I haven't integrated into a pipeline, but it's self-explanatory. You can see how you can then integrate it into a pipeline. All right. That's pretty much all I had for this session. I know it's a pretty long video than usually what I post, but if you liked it, please do like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Wish you all a nice rest of the day and see you all in another video from Let's DevOps. Take care. Bye bye.